If you're looking to buy a stacked NBA 2K account with max badges and more, visit sportstmb.com. He has been in the community for years and has hundreds of reviews. Click the first link in the description to get your account today.
Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it on the channel already, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I am trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I upload almost daily on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent sports talk while the world is on fire, this is the place for it. Today's video is on a topic that has long been debated, and that is, did Steve Nash deserve his MVPs? Did the two-time, nearly three-time MVP really deserve those awards, or was the league really just caught up in a moment and decided that Nash was worthy of 2 MVPs in a row? In the 2004-2005 season, Nash led the Phoenix Suns to 62 wins. This Suns team was built up of scoring options and defenders who didn't really have the ability to create their own offense. So Nash, as a playmaking point guard matched with Mike D'Antoni's offensive system, made for a perfect fit for one of the best offenses ever. However, this year, while yes, Nash did average 11 assists per game and just short of 50-40-90 shooting, he averaged just a measly 15.5 points per game, which is a lot less than you would expect of an MVP. In the following season, the team would get a bit worse with 54 wins. Nash's averages went up. He averaged 19 points and 11 assists, and this time he did shoot 50-40-90, shooting 44% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. But even then, 19 points per game is still very underwhelming for a player who wins an MVP. Now, the biggest gripe people tend to have with these MVP awards is that they thought there were more players more deserving. In fact, 4 players who are often considered top 20 players of all time, 3 being commonly considered top 10 players of all time, were the players in question. When you put both of Nash's MVPs under a microscope, they can seem really suspect, but there are also those that defend these MVPs and will fight tooth and nail that Nash deserved them. So let's talk about it. In the 04-05 season, Nash led the team to 62 wins, as I said, and he did this averaging just a measly 15.5 points per game. Now, this MVP he just barely won. He got 65 first place votes to the second place's 58. And in total, with all of the votes counted up, he only had 34 more points. The guy who came second was Shaquille O'Neal, who swears up and down that he deserved that MVP award. And it was really just between these two all season, even though I don't think it should have been. In total, there were 127 first place votes, and both Nash and Shaq got 123 of them. So let's take a look back at Shaq's 2005 season. This was obviously his first year after being traded from the Lakers. He averaged 23 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, and he did this shooting 60% from the field. This season from Shaq is incredibly underrated. People tend to have this idea that Shaq's career post-LA was basically just him being a shadow of his former self and he wasn't really that good. And for the most part, that is relatively true. However, this year for Miami, Shaq led the Heat to 59 wins. He did have a second-year Dwayne Wade, who was certainly a damn good player and an all-star, but Shaq was the better player this season, and the roster outside of Shaq and Wade was mid as hell. Udonis Haslem, Damon Jones, and Eddie Jones were really the only players on this team worth a damn. Alonzo Mourning was also on the team, but he only played 19 games this season. Shaq certainly wasn't 2000 and 2001 Shaq, but he also wasn't bad. He was pretty fucking great still. Now, all of that being said, did he deserve that MVP? I don't know about that. Really, the only two arguments against Nash winning MVP that season was his scoring numbers were low, and he also was a pretty shit defender. But Shaq at this point was bad defensively. He was slow as hell as a center and could not keep up on the perimeter. He was not as bad as Shaq, but he also played a position that was more impactful defensively, so you could argue he was just as bad. And then Shaq averaged 23, which was not anything crazy. He wasn't even the leading scorer on his team, and his 10 rebounds a game weren't anything outstanding for his size and position. I think this season is underrated, but that does not mean that I think Shaq should have won the MVP this year. Now, does that mean that I think Steve Nash should have won the MVP by default? Well, no. Just because the voters decided that this award was between these two does not mean that it should have been. Very often a narrative starts that it's between one player or another, and then a third player can get dicked out of it even if they don't deserve to be. Also this season, Dirk averaged 26 and 10, leading the Mavericks to a 58-win season with an incredibly mediocre roster. And LeBron in his second year did average 27, 7, and 7 on 47% shooting. His team did win just 42 games, so that probably disqualifies him, however. So if I had to come to a conclusion on who should have won that MVP, I'm going Dirk Nowitzki. Shaq only led his team to one more win than Dirk, despite having an all-star teammate and playing in a much weaker conference. And I'd say Dirk's numbers overall were just as impressive, if not more, than Shaq's. Nash only led his team to 4 more wins despite having way more help, and I'd say that Dirk's averages were a little bit more impressive. If you think Nash deserved it this year, however, I wouldn't really argue with you. Yeah, it's an abnormal thing for a guy to average 15 points and win MVP, but this year there was really no clear best player, no clear best narrative, no clear nothing. At this point in the NBA, they were really transitioning for finding their best player in the league that was also marketable, because the best player was probably Tim Duncan, but Kobe was not established yet, and LeBron was not established yet, and Shaq was too old. They're really just waiting around to see what happened, and because of that, I think Nash found the perfect window for him to get this MVP award. But why the voters did not give Dirk more consideration, I have no idea. Let's talk about the more heavily debated MVP that Nash won. As I said in the intro, Nash in this season bumped his averages up to nearly 19 points per game, but his team won 6 less games, which meant, while yes, Nash's numbers looked a little bit more MVP worthy, the main reason he won his MVP, which was his team's success, was not as substantial. And most importantly for this year, there was a lot more really good candidates available. Even though I don't think it should have been, the 2005 MVP race was really between Nash and Shaq. But in 2006, it was between Nash, Kobe, LeBron, and Dirk. And unfortunately for Nash, I'd say all but one of these three that didn't win MVP were more deserving than Nash. Let's talk about the most infamous man to not win MVP this year, and that is Kobe Bryant. He is the one of the three that I said I didn't think deserved the MVP award. I just don't think Kobe should have won MVP that season over the other candidates, or even over Steve Nash. And I think that for the same reason that I don't think Westbrook should have won the MVP in 2017. I can't play favorites here just because I'm way more of a fan of Kobe than Westbrook. In my most recent video, which you should watch if you haven't yet, I said that high-scoring seasons are overrated because by nature, a player averaging 34 or more points is really a flaw either in the player or in the team. So no, I don't think the season where Kobe averaged 35 points per game but got his team just 45 wins is worthy of an MVP, just like I did not feel that Russell Westbrook averaging a 30-point triple-double, leading his team to 47 wins, was worthy of an MVP. Numbers are great, but they are not everything. And sure, Kobe did not have proper help, which is not fair, but also, it's the reason why Kobe averaged 35 in the first place. If Kobe had proper help around him, he would not have needed to average 35 points per game. So if you're going to argue that Kobe should have won that MVP because look how many points he scored, and then argue in favor of it because, well, he didn't have all that much help, that's why he only won 45 games, you don't get both, because if he has the help, he doesn't average the 35. And then as for LeBron and Dirk, I often get frustrated by how often this MVP award is portrayed as something that Nash robbed from Kobe, when in reality it was an award that Nash robbed from one of these two. Dirk in 2006 was even better than the previous season. He had basically the same point and rebound numbers, but he was just 2% from the field off from shooting 50, 40, 90, and the team won 60 games this go around. Granted, the team did get a little bit better all around. This wasn't all Dirk. Jason Terry emerged as a serious scoring threat. Josh Howard got better as a scoring threat. And then as for LeBron, he averaged his career best 31.4 a game, 7 rebounds and 6.5 assists, shooting 48% from the field, and the team won 50 games pretty much entirely off of the back of LeBron. The next best players on his team that played over 40 games were Zydrunas Ilgauskas and Drew Gooden, who were fine players, but also not your typical second and third best player on a 50-win team type of guys. But if I'm choosing between Dirk and LeBron, I'm gonna have to go with Dirk again because he won 10 more games in a tougher conference. And I'd say that Dirk's help was about 10% better, and their numbers were close enough that I think that mitigates that. Which basically means that if it were up to me, Dirk would not only be a 3-time MVP, but he would have 3 consecutive MVP awards, making him only the 4th player in NBA history to do that. So I guess my conclusion here is that no, Nash did not deserve his MVP awards. Or sometimes the word deserve can be a little harsh. He should not have won them over other players. Now that being said, he's still one of the greatest players of all time, one of the greatest point guards of all time, and I don't think Nash straight up robbed at least the 05 MVP, but at the end of the day, there were more deserving candidates both in 05 and especially in 06. What I do think is often forgotten in history is just how close Nash was to three-peating as an MVP. In 2003, he came second to Dirk in MVP voting with 40 less first place votes, but just 125 less overall points. So Nash very well could have been a 3-time MVP, and I can only imagine just how more enraged people would be under that circumstance. But anyways, that was Did Steve Nash deserve his MVP awards? The answer is basically no, not really, and Dirk Nowitzki should be a 3-time consecutive MVP. But that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.